There are things that you talk about in public, and there are things that you talk about among friends, and there are things you don't talk about. The latter is what I need your permission to talk about today. I knew you'd like it. But honestly, I don't expect any part of this conversation to be comfortable for any of us. The only defense I have is our governor started it. I've had the good fortune for many years of having a physician who was my personal friend, which is great when you need some medical attention in off hours and you need some immediacy of care. Dr. Gill has been at an event with me and just heard me coughing and called in a prescription for me. It's nice to have friends in the medical profession. However, once a year, there is an uncommonly uncomfortable moment when the ultimate exit-only orifice of a man's body calls for what the medical profession calls a digital exam. Now, digital typically means electronic and on a small screen. In this case, digital involves my friend's index finger, which makes making eye contact on the way out of the office rather awkward. It's not like the pelvic exam that women have to endure in the process of their annual physical. It's similar in terms of vulnerability and awkwardness, but in any reasonable analysis, it's more brief and slightly less personal an interaction than women have to regularly endure. The only thing that makes a man drop his drawers and bend over is that it is a necessary part of a medical exam that could mean life or death. However, if my physician, who is a friend, should propose such an exam for any other reason, that would be the height of inappropriate, wouldn't it? So imagine, gentlemen, that your dentist proposes including this procedure in your semi-annual checkup. Or your pharmacist suggests that this is a part of a standard procedure for getting your prescriptions filled. There is no point in a man's life in which we are asking for one kind of medical service and having another imposed upon us that we aren't asking for that serves no medical reason whatsoever. We will not drop our drawers and be violated for no reason. Can you imagine the litigation and controversy that it would create if anyone ever tried to insist that that be a part of picking up your prescriptions or having your dental checkup? So imagine my surprise. This week I was sitting in John and Di Churcher's living room watching the BBC, which was, I don't mind telling you, giving endless coverage to the visit of our president to England, and BBC reporters painstakingly pointing out in fine detail what an immoral and mentally deficient person that our president really is. But as if bearing the burden of that embarrassment as an American in London was not enough, the BBC turned its attention to Missouri. In the race to the moral bottom among red states trying to legislate away a woman's right to elect to terminate a pregnancy, a constitutional right, Missouri has pulled into the definitive lead. The state government has been trying to find a way to close down the last remaining abortion provider in our state, that's in St. Louis, so that Missouri would then be the only state of all 50 states that did not have a legal, safe provider of abortion services. But our governor and his public health official, Dr. Randall Williams, announced that any woman seeking an abortion had to submit to a medical pelvic exam. Not one, two. They have to submit to two before receiving an abortion. The first one maybe has some medical plausibility. Not much. I'm a doctor, I'll tell you that. Not that I... Hey, I am. But the second pelvic exam adds expense, it adds time, and it adds humiliation. This is an attempt at increasing the cost of obtaining an abortion to put up a barrier for low-income women, but also making it an invasive vaginal exam is intended to scare off those who are unwilling to endure what can only be called state-mandated sexual assault. If you insist that a woman must have instruments and a stranger's fingers inserted into their vagina for no medical reason in order to exercise their constitutional rights not to be forced into motherhood, then that is, in anyone's universe, sexual assault. Pity the fool that tried to do it to my daughter. I've got a shovel in a backyard, and I'm not afraid to use either one of them. I've asked Dr. Mobley to be our liturgist today because Gil actually has some professional history with Dr. Williams, and I'm interested in hearing what Gil has to say about him, which is not all bad. I understand that Williams has done some laudable work in his political career as a physician. However, what Rachel Maddow made internationally known about his past is that in 2016 in the state of North Carolina, he was hired to be their public health officer so that he would reverse the decision of his predecessor, who said that it was unsafe to consume water that had been contaminated by coal ash. This byproduct of coal mining contains mercury and arsenic and other toxins, which were found to be at levels threatening to human life. Williams, however, was willing to assure the public that their drinking water was safe when it very clearly was not. He did not even order further tests. He did not look at the tests that exist. He was told to declare the water was safe, and he did it. Now, I'm sure Dr. Gill's going to tell us some of the good stuff that he's done, but Gil, you know, you can put lipstick on a pig and it's still bacon on a cloven hoof, isn't it? What we see in Dr. Williams is a glaring example of someone who is willing to set aside what he knows about medicine, what he knows about science, what he knows about the truth, about integrity, honesty, character, decency, in order to bow to the throne of power. We see this all the time in national politics. One of the most disappointing examples is Senator Lindsey Graham, who very honestly called Trump a kook who is unfit to be president during the campaign in 2016. But almost as soon as Trump was inaugurated, Lindsey Graham changed his tune in a total reversal, deriding the media for insinuating that Trump was a kook and unfit to be president. Now, as a church, we try to be and to do a lot of things to make the world a better place. But the single most important thing that we do is speak truth to power. Elected officials often do what Lindsey Graham confessed to in a recent interview. They say and they do what they have to say and do to get reelected. Lindsey Graham is a senator from South Carolina, and in South Carolina, you need to praise Donald Trump if you expect to be reelected. People like Dr. Williams say and do what they have to do to obtain and keep a government-appointed job. And I get it. Almost every priest and pastor in this country is stuck in the exact same spot. They either have the integrity to tell the truth, or they get to keep their jobs by telling lies every Sunday. You have to think that being forced to tell obvious lies is why people like Sean Spicer and Sarah Huckabee didn't last very long as White House press secretaries. Now, Huckabee has announced that she's resigning soon, and I'll believe it as soon as she publicly denies it, because that's the only way that you can ever tell that it's what's happening. So Williams, who is evidently not an untalented physician, is willing to do absolutely monstrous things in order to hold on to a place in government. And I couldn't do it. I trust that you couldn't do it. We try to bolster people's awareness and commitment to also become people who just couldn't do it. But this sort of hypocrisy is as common as dirt in our chapter of history. It's disgusting, but it's a fact. So that is what we're dealing with. And just to help put this into perspective, I want to take a moment to mention Dr. Larry Nasser of Michigan State fame. And I'm not going to show you a picture of Dr. Nasser. I don't want to look at him. But this is a photo of 80 of his victims who gathered at one time to talk about how they were victimized under the guise of a medical exam. Without being too graphic about it, what Larry Nasser did to these young women is essentially the same thing as what Governor Parsons and Dr. Williams have mandated for women who are seeking an abortion. Pretending to conduct a medical exam while actually just invading a woman's vagina for no medical reason. And as shocking as it is to see these 80 young female athletes in a group photo, I want to remind you that Nasser was recently sentenced to 175 years in prison for what he did. And he molested about 100 women. Our governor and Dr. Williams have now mandated that about 3,000 women a year be sexually assaulted in the state of Missouri. So tell me if I'm wrong, but shouldn't the governor and Dr. Williams get a prison cell right next to Larry Nasser? And if the numbers work out, it'd be for about 500 years. Now, maybe it's not my place to judge, but if Governor Parson and Dr. Williams are in any way morally different than Dr. Larry Nasser, then I'm going to need someone to explain to me how he's different, because I don't see it. Now, to be clear, I'm not talking about the clinic doctors. They don't want to perform this unnecessary exam. They, in fact, apologize to their patients for having to do it. And in many cases, I understand, the patients apologize to the physician for having to be put through an unnecessary and grossly personal invasion of their body. They're doing something, and you know, the AMA would not be happy with this. The doctors are not supposed to perform unnecessary medical procedures. And so some of what's a doctor under supervision called intern? Residents. Some of the residents are refusing to do it because they see that they could end up being sued and fail to become certified by the AMA. They're putting their careers at stake in order to help women to obtain their constitutionally guaranteed rights. Now, I may have taken a little bit too much time to make this point, but let me sum it up for you. The state of Missouri, in order to create greater barriers for women seeking an abortion, have mandated an invasive pelvic exam to be repeated twice, adding expense, humiliation, and trauma on what could easily be understood to be the worst day in a woman's life. And it is being done with the tacit approval of our state legislature, which is overwhelmingly male and overwhelmingly Republican. However, if the governor and Dr. Williams were to mandate, for example, a digital prostate exam for men who were seeking a prescription for an erectile dysfunction medication, an entirely unnecessary but precisely similar requirement, then this male-dominated legislature of this state would no doubt begin impeachment procedures for both the doctor and the governor. Men will not tolerate state-mandated sexual assault against themselves. What I'm asking you folks to think about is, why is it that we wouldn't tolerate that for men, but we legally mandate it for women? How could there be so much disparity? Now, I'm sorry that our internet audience couldn't get to hear Ayanna Williams sang our anthem, which is a rather bawdy English melody written more than 300 years ago, in which a woman euphemistically says or speaks about how many men have tried to seduce her, but the chorus always comes back to insist, "My thing is my own." And it very cleverly goes through many verses asserting that women are in charge of their own bodies and men need to keep their hands off of women's private parts. Of course, it has lots and lots of verses. Sean and I picked the ones we thought we could have sung in church. But you heard enough to get the idea of where the more explicit verses might have gone. I find it fascinating that this awareness of women's empowerment was being so cleverly made popular in England over 300 years ago. Patriarchy, it seems, has been identified, condemned, and yet persists. It's evidently very hard to kill off. But isn't it about time? But it was more than 100 years ago that Margaret Sanger opened the first birth control clinic in New York. She was promptly arrested for doing that. However, let me end where we began today with her famous quote, "No woman can call herself free who does not own and control her body. No woman can call herself free until she can choose consciously whether she will or will not be a mother." Now, I get it that a lot of people, and not just Catholics and evangelicals, but a whole lot of people have very passionate feelings about abortion. Today's Father's Day, and I can tell you with absolute certainty that I am a father because abortion was not legal in South Korea in 1988 when my daughter's birth mother decided to give her up for adoption. For that matter, I am here because abortion was not legal in the United States in 1956 when my mother had her second accidental pregnancy that she told me herself depressed her so much that they couldn't come up with a better name for me to go on the birth certificate. I get that there is an argument to be made against abortion, but what we're trying to say here in the midst of this horribly controversial and complicated matter is that in a free nation, the choice belongs to the woman who is pregnant. Not Missouri's governor, not the health administrator, not Catholic priests, not evangelical ministers, not even the parents of lovers or pregnant women. Her thing is her own, and our agreement or consent is not relevant. If I may call upon my 18th century vocabulary, a pox upon anyone who thinks otherwise.
Thank you for watching our videos. We are entirely dependent on the donations of our listeners and members. We hope that you find this content to be important enough to help us to keep offering these videos to the public at no charge by becoming a regular contributor. Please click on the donate button on our website at www.spfccc.org. Thank you for your support of progressive religious programming.